All right, everybody. Welcome to Destination Never Here, podcast episode number 5, I believe, give or take one or two. Today's guest is Greg Schaefer, none other than my best friend. I always tell everybody he's my best friend, but I don't know I'm his best friend, but I'll take it. Um, it's one of those things. Greg, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, brother. Good to see you.
Good to see you. So, in Texas here, we've been dealing with these storms and a whole bunch of atrocity things coming from the active shooter world. And the Destination Never Here podcast was really started for free tips and tricks and secrets. And people truthfully don't usually want that. They want to know who's behind it. So as you know, we, dived in and we've had everybody on. We've never had anybody like you on yet, but we're excited to have you. And I always send out feelers on whether it's LinkedIn or social media, and by far, the surveys have been, they want to hear about FBI, they want to hear about hostage rescue team, they want to hear about tier one operators, they want to hear about the people that talk a lot of smack and why they do. And that's one of the best questions I've had so far by a page that I follow, and I always ask their advice because they're notorious in the world of undercover work. And they said, most people talk so much smack about undercovers, but undercovers talk the most smack. And I'm like, well, I was undercover for a few years, so I understand that, right? I'm not immune to that. But I think we're going to dive in and find out about HRT and really not defend HRT or defend your position or defend what a tier one operator is. I want to talk about the mindset of how you got there and why you went that way. And to figure that out, I think we need to peel back your layers, man. I mean, are you good with that?
I'm good with that.
Transparency. Cool. So we're going to be talking about your book along the way today, and the first things we just want to kind of get some like background information, almost if you were interviewing somebody. You were an FBI agent forever. Talk about your interviews, but in the reverse, where'd you grow up, and maybe tell everybody about your background overseas.
Chris, I grew up in an idyllic family. My mom and dad loved each other and loved their 4 sons. I'm one of 4 boys. My dad was an IBMer. Um, that means that we moved around quite a bit growing up. I think last count, I lived in 15 states and a couple foreign countries. Um, Went to high school in Paris, France. That was a unique experience. That kind of got the international bug in me that I still have today when it comes to traveling. But grew up with, again, 3 brothers, really close knit family because we moved around so much. The 3 brothers developed really close relationships with one another. My older brother, who's only 13 months older than I am, we went to school together, played sports together, all growing up. And then, decided very early on that, I really wanted to get into law enforcement. It was just, you know how it is. It's like being a teacher or a doctor or a nurse or law enforcement. It's in your DNA. You just can't deny it. And I knew from a very early age that I wanted to go in some kind of law enforcement, not exactly sure what type. Um, and I was always intrigued as well as being in the military. And as a result of that, I looked into going to one of the military academies for college. And luckily, I got into the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. Went there in 1980, graduated in 1984, and then did 7 years of active duty in the Coast Guard. Had command of my own patrol boat during that time, which was just a highlight of my career. Um, Being a commanding officer of an 82-foot boat with a crew of 12 in South Florida during the height of the drug war, it was just a lot of fun. And that's where federal law enforcement, again, came into my life. Worked very closely during that time in Coast Guard with the DEA, doing drug interdiction operations in South Florida and the Caribbean Basin. DEA recruited me very highly. In the Coast Guard, kind of the writings on the wall, the higher in rank you get, the bigger the boat you go into, and the bigger the boats, the more time at sea. The more time at sea, the more time away from home. I then was just recently married, had my first kid, and didn't really want to spend all that time at sea. So during this time, my younger brother Jeff became a Secret Service agent, and he said, hey, this federal law enforcement gig's kind of a cool thing. So I looked into all the different law enforcement agencies, got into the FBI in 1995, and had a 20-year career in the FBI, and retired in 2015 and started my security company.
Okay, so let's go back to we're living in another state or country, and you got your brothers to support you. And without bringing them in, I mean, you can do whatever you want. I'm not going to bring them in because I know them, but let that naturally happen on its own. But tell everybody in like maybe 30 seconds or 45 seconds my one of my favorite stories about me and you, because like we have 1,000 funny stories that you don't think are so funny. I think are funny because I'm a goofball, and then we have vice versa stories. But when met you, we were over in Las Colinas at the club one day, and you're like, "Hey man, how are you?" You had your ring on. Do you remember what I said to you? Do you remember how you remember having the Coast Guard ring on? I'm like, "What the hell? I didn't know you were a Coast Guard Academy graduate all those years." Remember the story, or I'll refresh your memory.
Go ahead. I remember the story, but go ahead.
We're in Las Colinas Club, and Greg walks up, "Brother, man, how are you?" And he goes to shake my hand. I give him a hug. I'm like, "What the hell is that?" He hit me, and he's got this giant ring on it, and it just says, "Look, like, hey, this is me. How are you?" And I'm like, "What the hell is that? Is that it's got to be HRT, right? HRT equals you can do whatever you want." He's like, "No, it's a Coast Guard Academy ring." I'm like, I would lead with that. I'd go everywhere I go and say, Greg Schaefer, Coast Guard Academy, class of, the best there ever was. And I don't know if you ever got that, like how deep that was to me, but that was like a memorable moment. And I think for people that listen to this podcast, and, we've had up to, on the other, across all platforms, like up to 10, 15, 20,000 viewers. And the feedback that we get back, people appreciate the emotional connection of how you got somewhere. So I've asked you before, but of course they don't. Nobody else knows. How did you pick the Coast Guard Academy, and maybe tell us how it picked you?
Yeah. I remember when I was like 12, 13 years old, flying back to, I guess it was about 14 years old, flying back to Paris from some home leave here in the States. And at the airport in, I think it was either LaGuardia or Kennedy Airport, New York Airport, ran across about a dozen or so West Point cadets. And they're in their dress grays with their gray capes. And, I looked at them, my dad was with me, and I said, wow, who are those guys? And my dad said, well, those are West Point cadets. I said, oh, wow, I'm really thinking about doing that. And my dad really encouraged me and kind of pushed me forward and said, well, go talk to them, ask them what it takes to get into West Point. And I remember those guys, I couldn't tell you their names for the life of me. And this was probably in 1977. Um, and they literally changed my life because I talked about the entrance requirements getting into the academy, and they were just so gracious to talk to some young kid about what they did and what they're doing. So again, this 1977, President Carter was the president at the time. Not a good time to be in the military. I graduated in 1980, so that was right before Reagan got elected. And again, being in the military just wasn't that cool. So I did get an appointment to the Naval Academy and the Coast Guard Academy as well. So I got two appointments. One is the Coast Guard Academy is the only service academy that's on a national competition scale. You don't need a congressional appointment for Coast Guard Academy. So I got a congressional appointment to the Naval Academy, and then got accepted to the Coast Guard Academy. And it came down to basically the law enforcement mission of the Coast Guard. Again, not a cool time to be in the military, and the peacetime mission of the Coast Guard is what really intrigued me. They were doing drug interdiction, they were doing search and rescue, they were doing Haitian migration interdiction operations. So they were just doing some really cool stuff. And at the time they were called the Smokies of the Sea. And again, that law enforcement bug bit me many years prior to that. So I really like the law enforcement aspect of the Coast Guard. That's why I chose the academy. And again, they give you such immense responsibilities at a very low rank. As lieutenant junior grade in 02, they gave me a patrol boat with 12 men on board and said, you're the captain, you're the skipper, go out and do great things. And so I chose the Coast Guard Academy primarily for its law enforcement missions. And I also played football there for 4 years. It was a Division III school, and I knew that I have a lot more opportunity to play football at that level than at the Division I level of the Naval Academy. So that's kind of why I chose that.
So a couple things there. For those listening that don't know what Smokey the Sea means, go look at Smokey and the Bandit online, because that's about some CB lingo from the 80s, if I've ever remember it. And that's funny because you brought back some memories that I forgot about that. I didn't know Coast Guard Academy is D3, and
Yeah.
I knew you played football. What tell us about how that evolved. Did you play high school football or you were playing rec ball and it translated or what?
Yeah, I played pretty much three sports all through high school. Football in the fall, basketball in the winter, and baseball during the spring. And then went to the Coast Guard Academy. I actually played baseball and football my freshman year. But even at that level, you have to concentrate on one sport. So I really loved football, and I was a wide receiver, and played football all 4 years at the Coast Guard Academy. And some of my greatest memories are playing ball there, and some of my best friends even today. Jeff Ogden, Jack Santucci, Bill Hookey. They'll listen to this, and I call out to them because they were my teammates and still brothers to this day.
Yeah, man, that core, family core and the the base that you had growing up and taking you into something like the academy where you remain friends with people, forever,
Mhm.
backwards. I have maybe two lifelong friends, but I think the odd part is just being human. Nothing you, nothing me, nothing anybody else, just the way humans are. People that have been on the podcast that have climbed to the places that you have climbed either have a great backstory or a terrible backstory. There
Yeah,
is no in between, and I mean,
yeah, you're right.
I,
Hmm.
I have a terrible backstory, and I fought and clawed everywhere, and I don't know that I'm where I want to be, but I always, I try to make it, this, like I promote the we, not the me, right? And I want it to be um for everyone else. And to hear your story, tell, give us that day, because you tell a lot of emotional stories. And when I filmed our short before you came on, and I talked about you being an expert in literally mitigating evil, but to tell people how close you and I are, maybe they don't know. I'll throw out some words to you, and you tell me what they mean. So if I were to reach down and grab your book and I said, "Hey, man, um, EE or MM or E squared M squared, what does that mean?"
Evil exists, and let's see, minutes matter.
There you go. Hey, so it's funny because you tell people things like that and they can't, they don't have it, but we have so many backstories in our brain. It takes a minute to come forward, right? So you had that baseline of life and it brought you to where you are today. And it helped you develop that mindset of evil exists and minutes matter. And people are sometimes on the other lines of these podcasts. And this is where you either hook them or book them, where they're going to, stay or go. And without insulting anybody, the people that do what you do think they could do it too. I mean, the people that watch what you do or did, they're like, hey, I could do that because I saw John Wick in the movies last night, and okay, cool, but hopefully you're never in that environment. But I think what's important is your expertise on violence. I mean, people think about violence. You say something often about being skilled at violence. I'll let you fill in that blank there. But what does that mean to you when you tell people, hey, about violence? What do you say if they're going to choose violence? What do you tell them?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles that you and I both have when we give our presentations on active shooter response and prevention, and try to educate them on what to look for and what to be aware of. One of the biggest hurdles is that most people truly don't recognize that evil exists. Most people have never been a victim of true violence, and because of that, they're thinking to themselves, "Well, it's never happened to me, so therefore I'm safe." Hope is not a plan. Hope is just that, it's a hope. And getting people to truly understand that evil does exist. And in today's world, you can't pick up a paper, or you can't watch the news or go online and not realize that violence has certainly increased, not only in the United States, but worldwide. Um, not to get political, but our southern border being wide open right now, there are just a host, thousands upon thousands, if not tens of thousands, of very evil people with evil intent come into our nation who want to do bad things because that's in their nature. Um, but again, most people, as a result of not being a victim of violence prior in their life, think that they're immune from it, and they're not. So, as I always say, always have a plan. Um, you know, we have plans in our mind when bad things happen, and we take preventive measures. You know, we all have car insurance against getting a car accident. We all have home insurance, fire insurance. We all have health insurance. We all lock our doors at night. We wear a seatbelt when we drive. We have a fire extinguisher in the kitchen. We take all these preventative measures for if and when bad things happen. But what most people don't do is take preventative measures for when really, really bad things happen. And I'm talking about violence. What is your plan of action should somebody stick a gun to your face and ask for your wallet, or kick in your front door in a home invasion, or try to rob you as you're pumping gas at the gas station? What's your plan of action then? Again, we do all these preventative measures to keep our people, our family, ourselves, and the people around us safe, but we don't take preventative measures to prevent an act of violence or how to react to an act of violence. And maybe that's carrying a firearm, or maybe it's taking classes, or maybe it's just developing good situational awareness. With good situational awareness, you should be able to avoid most of those incidences. But people go through life with blinders on, again, because they've never been a victim of violence. They think it's never going to happen to them, and that's a hope. That's not a plan.
So getting into that, we're going to back up in a second, but just to finish that point about violence, as a mediator, right? Like I'm in the middle of this. You're on the far side of the far right side or left, whatever side, doesn't matter, not political, but the far side of violence where the application of violence, how to prevent violence, how to inflict violence, to the person that just came out of John Wick number 4, 3, 2, or 1, or Jason Bourne movie or whatever. And they say, I don't need to worry about this plan that Greg told me about because I'm going to do violence. But you have this thing that you tell people, and maybe it's so nonchalant you don't even know it. But tell me about, if you're going to choose violence, you better what?
Be good at it.
That's it. That's 100%. And
yeah,
people, do you think people believe that, or do you think they just think that?
I think they just think that. I want to give credit to Tim Larkin. He's an author of a book. He's a former Navy guy, naval intelligence officer who has studied violence as well. And Tim Larkin wrote a book called "When Violence is the Answer." And so my take on, he says this. He goes, violence is seldom the answer, and I totally agree. It really is. Walk away from every fight you can, because you never know what the skill set is or what the other guy's carrying or what his mindset is. So, swallow your ego, swallow your pride, and walk away from every fight that you can, because you just never know. But if violence is the answer, it's the only answer. And if violence is the only answer, you better be good at it. Because if you're in a violent encounter and you don't think violence is the only solution, you've already lost the battle. Okay. In a violent situation, the only way out of a violent situation is through greater violence. There's no other way around it. If you don't use greater violence, you are then a victim of that violence.
Right. Right. And I don't think people realize, my favorite saying in the whole world, I think I even made it up, but maybe not. I've heard a million things. The most committed wins, right?
Yes. Yep.
Once you commit to what you're going to do, you have to be overly committed. I think that pigtails nicely on what you're talking about. And, to get to that mindset, people think, Greg Schaefer came out of the womb and there he is, graduated HRT so easy, and Coast Guard, the easy man, the smart man's Navy, or there are so many things, right? Because people make assumptions because they're not you and they want to be, or their ego needs to live up to what they think they are and they have to validate themselves. And I have been with you talking to very decorated SWAT people. I almost joined the FBI, but I was too good, because they're justifying their own existence, right? And their own thing. And I don't think people understand really the level, the height of the mountain, that you've climbed, that most people find insurmountable. So take me to this really dark place in your brain. You're in the Coast Guard and there's a death and you're a junior kid. How old are you when this happens, and what happened? Without disrespecting the family, the sailor, or anything else, just like what happened? Walk me through that, or walk us all through that real quick, because I want to build the mindset of life's not easy. There's a whole bunch of ups and downs.
You talking about the search and rescue cases I had in the Coast Guard?
Yeah, where didn't you have a sailor or somebody die under your command, and you had to deal with that?
Yeah, I was on the Coast Guard cutter Chase.
There you
We
go.
had a shipboard fire coming back from doing operations down in the Windward Passage between Haiti and Cuba, doing Haitian migration interdiction operations. It's called HMIO, and we're coming back from a 3-month deployment, and on the way back to our home port of Boston, Massachusetts, we suffered a shipboard fire, and several people were injured, but we did have one sailor on board who died of smoke inhalation. And you know, it hits you hard when you lose a shipmate, um, and then you're still 3 or 4 days away from port, and his body's still on board, and
How old
you
were
get the
you?
22, 23.
Did you know you were invincible yet?
No, I'm not
Yeah.
invincible today. So
Now I come on, my nickname for you is what? Undeadable, right? So but that brought in that mindset for you, right? Like it started like that didn't start there, but that was a hardship for you, yes?
it's a hardship, absolutely, and it does bring to the forefront that you are not invincible, that you are vulnerable, and you just never know when things like that can happen. I mean, he's a well-trained sailor, and he got trapped in the engine room with that oily, dark black smoke that results from an oil fire, and succumbed to smoke inhalation. So it does.
What did you have to do with that? How did, I mean, I know you have the body of the respect. Did you have to write a letter to the family? How did that come back to remind you in those really dark places that you've been in life? Does that, because I mean, darkness begets darkness, but there's a way out. So do you remember having to write a letter or anything?
I did not, because that was, again, that was not on my patrol boat. That was on my first unit, which was a 378-foot cutter. So there was 18 officers on board and about 150 crew. So the commanding officer of that boat, John Lockwood, was the captain's name at the time. He had to write a letter to the parents, and then we all had a shipboard ceremony for the sailor who died. But fortunately, again, wasn't when I had command of my patrol boat. It was on a larger cutter on my first tour.
But still, that was pretty impactful, right? Like, because you
Yes.
see how old, do you know how old do you remember how old the sailor was by any chance? Was he, senior level or low level?
I think he's late 20s, early 30s. So yeah, I think he was E5 at the time.
Yeah. I think, I have some stories where I remember losing friends, teammates, peers, whatever. I think what happens to me is like if I'll think about that, it just takes me down those dark holes, right? And I run through all that, so I literally physically run, and sometimes I'll go longer because the brain's got to reset. But I also know that in the times of things are tough, I reset my brain by thinking back to how what a dishonor it would be to just let that be for nothing, right?
Yeah.
And then so when you hang on to the mission, the people below you, above you, they're always side by side, and that was an impactful story you told me one day. So I just want to share that and kind of open it up to we're not invincible. And you're this dude ready to go and highly sought after by every three-letter agency. You join the FBI, and I have privilege to know a couple things, so you can, you can expand on or not. But you go to join the FBI, and here you are. You have your letter, and what happened?
You get
Yes, you
to
don't have to. You can just get some, whatever.
I assume you're talking about the hiring freeze the FBI
Of
had.
course, of course.
So I get my appointment letter for the FBI and resign my commission from the Coast Guard. I was a senior lieutenant at the time. And the FBI went into a hiring freeze and a moratorium on hiring. So here I am, married with one of my first of two daughters, and being told that I don't have a job anymore because the FBI, are freezing their hiring. So, and I ended up scrambling around looking for a job and ended up working for a pharmaceutical company that will here to be not be named, but it's a very
Of course.
popular, very famous pharmaceutical company. And so I sold drugs for 4 years.
Well, I mean, yeah, but
Hated every minute of it. Hated every minute of it. I was in South Florida, Fort Myers Beach, Florida, doing this, so the location was great. I had a beautiful home. My wife was very happy. It was the beginning of the end for that marriage because 4 years later, the FBI called me back and said, "Hey, we're hiring again, and we saw that you had an appointment. Would you still be interested?" And I said, "Absolutely." So I took about a 50% pay cut and went to the FBI from there, and that did not make the wife very happy.
Well,
So
fame and
anyway,
fortune isn't cheap, right?
but I told her, I said, "Listen, you knew from the minute you met me that this is something I've always wanted to do. Just because I have a good job now, making good money, doesn't change my dream. So in 1995, I went to Quantico and became an FBI agent about 6 months later.
And here comes the soul grab, right? So people, a lot of people, they don't know my situation. They just see X, or they see your situation. Since it's about you today, we had one of your peers on that went through the exact same hiring freeze, ended up in the FBI later. He was just on an episode before. Won't say anything more about that because he did. But when people look at you and say, "Oh my God, Greg, you are so lucky. You have it so easy. You're just great family." Walked in, and do you think back to that maybe moment where you lost a teammate, or the moment where they gut punch you and say, "Hey, your dream's not coming true today. We're having a hiring freeze," and you spent 4 years clawing to get back, and even though you're living the dream, you're living someone else's dream. Right? I mean, because
Exactly, and that was well stated. Very well said.
yeah, I think people they really do believe how easy it is. Oh, you got a book that's so easy, and we'll talk about how hard that was to write and some of the ass beatings that you took along the way, because people don't, and that's what this is about, opening up the transparency and the vulnerability and the authenticity of every guest that we have. That's our theme. And the reason is because I want others to know that, the business of terrorism sucks. Counterterrorism sucks. Domestic terrorism sucks. You said the southern border sucks. The northern border sucks. Internal violence. I mean, it's all bad. And I really want people to capture the authenticity of doing these types of jobs isn't always great. And you, the most committed wins. And look at your commitment, that 4 year gap. Was that hell? I mean, was it up and down, or, did the money make it easy?
Um, no, I mean the money made it comfortable.
Mhm.
Like you said, I was living somebody else's dream, um, and I was miserable and just I literally hated every minute of it. I hated calling on doctors and schlepping around these sample drugs and talking, pharmaceutical type things to doctors all day long, 5 days a week, knowing in my heart of hearts that this is not why I left the Coast Guard. This is not why, you know, I put a application in and went through all that, you know, trials and tribulations of that. I mean, getting into the FBI, it's about a year-long process. I get people calling me all the time asking me, you know, what's it like to be an FBI agent? I think I want to be one. What's the process? And I always tell them, listen, if you're thinking about doing it, start the process now, because you're not going to get a call from the FBI saying, hey, we accept you for another 12 months. It first starts with a, three or four page application. And that just kind of weeds out those that aren't qualified. They don't have a college degree. They're not, US citizens, that sort of thing. So it's, 4 page application initially to weed them out. And then you have your background check. And depending on, where you grew up and how often you moved, that background checks, they take months and months and months. And because I moved around so much, they go to every neighbor that you ever lived next to and talk to pretty much all your teachers to get your background check completed. And then you have to do a physical exam. Then you have to do a physical fitness test. And then you have to do a psychological test. And then you have to do the polygraph, the lie detector test. 75% of the applicants fail their polygraph. So it's a very lengthy process with a lot of opportunities to fail, as they say. So, everybody's saying, oh, yeah, your life was so easy. I busted my ass, just graduated from the Coast Guard Academy. I'm not the brightest bulb in the shop. And, I graduated with a 2.6 grade point average. And you had to have a 2.0 to graduate. Anything lower than 2.0, they kick you out. But I busted my ass and spent a lot of late nights and all-nighters studying so I can pass those engineering and those calculus courses and, differential equations. What the hell's a differential equation? I didn't take a class in it.
Right.
So,
Right.
it's, again, yeah, I had a great family, I had great parents and great supporting brothers and mom and dads and that sort of thing. But it doesn't mean I didn't have to bust my ass to get everything that, that I earned. You got to bust your ass to stay in shape. You got to bust your ass to, play football at the same time trying to make the grades. You got to, bust your ass to get, keep your life clean so that you can pass the polygraph exam. for the FBI. And then again, when you get to the FBI Academy, you have academics, you have physical fitness, and you have the stresses of being away from your family for 6 months.
And staying healthy, eating right, doing the things that, I won't, I asked somebody else, we won't get into this one about academy mates and, from the FBI, but okay. So we fast forward, we're through the 4 years going in the FBI. Did you have any say of where you went did you have a dream sheet when you graduated, or did you get assigned where you went?
An interesting story there. Again, this is 1995. During that time, there was an FBI class about every 2 weeks graduating. Each class had about 50, 55 students in it. And about halfway through your time at the FBI Academy, you rank order 56 of all the field offices the FBI has. So we have 56 field offices. You put down the first place you want to go and the last place you'd like to go to. My last place was like New York. Then Newark was the second to the bottom, and then, I was looking at more for the Southeast United States. Well, during this time, the Unabomber was in play, and the Unabomber task force was set out of the San Francisco field office of the FBI. And because Unabomber was, public enemy number one, the FBI office in San Francisco took half of their agents, 50% of all their agents, and put them on the Unabomber task force. So we got to find this guy. So now the FBI office in San Francisco has about 350 agents in it. So half of them are now on the Unabomber task force. So they need to backfill all those agents. So half of my graduating class and 3 classes after mine, half of those classes were all sent to San Francisco. So I got my 51st choice when it came to my list of 56, and it was San Francisco. And the reason San Francisco was so low on my list is it's such a high cost of living, and I knew what I was going to be making as a GS10, brand new street agent. You're not making a lot of money, and I had a wife and a kid to support. I put those places that were really high cost of living kind of on the bottom of my list. I got my 51st choice, so didn't have much say.
Nice. Did you enjoy the task force, or what was the best takeaway?
I wasn't
on.
I didn't go on the Unabomber task force. They didn't put any new agents on it because we're too stupid. So I was assigned to actually a violent crime task force out of the San Rafael RA, which is the North Bay of San Francisco, which in hindsight was just fantastic. I had a great boss. She allowed me to, she gave me a lot of rope to either hang myself or do good things, and started developing a lot of informants. Ended up making a lot of arrests right away. At that time, the FBI was going through their what they call an enhanced SWAT team program. Mm-hmm. Every major field office, all 56 field offices have a SWAT team. Most of those SWAT teams are about 15 persons strong. But the FBI in 1995 decided to name 7 offices which were to have what they called enhanced SWAT teams, about 45 SWAT operators versus the 15 or 18. And San Francisco was one of those offices. And because they needed, an additional 30, SWAT agents, they allowed anybody with police or military experience to try out for the SWAT team as a new agent. Because historically, before that time, in order to try out for the SWAT team, you had to have 2 years on the street. So they did away with the 2 years experience required, that if you did have military police experience, you could try out for the SWAT team. So I arrived at my new office in San Francisco in September, and I think in November they had a SWAT tryout, and my boss allowed me to try out for it, and I made a SWAT team. So before January 1st, I was now a brand new agent with 3 months experience, and now a member of the FBI San Francisco SWAT team. Again, that teamwork, the camaraderie, and that's where I had my first taste of the HRT. The enhanced SWAT teams were given advanced training by the HRT. So they either sent us to HRT in Quantico, or HRT came out to San Francisco and would give us enhanced CQB training. We did a lot of work with the helicopters. We did extra work in the mountains at the Marine Corps Mountain Warfare School there in California, Pickle Meadows. Went there. So my first experience with HRT was a direct result of being on an enhanced SWAT team.
Right on. What's one of the, You pick good, bad, or ugly stories of a new agent. You got an informant, you're making an arrest, and something went either wrong or great. What was, give me an easy one out of San Francisco.
Operation Black Widow. It was highlighted in Maxim magazine. Yeah, I think it was highlighted in Playboy magazine. I developed an informant who was good for about a dozen murders, and ended up he didn't want to go to prison because we had rolled him up on something else, or the locals had rolled him up on something else. And we found out that the Nuestra Familia, our family, a Mexican mafia type organization, Mexican drug cartel, was running their criminal organization from the prisons of California, particularly Pelican Bay. Now, Pelican Bay was a very, high risk, almost like a supermax in Northern California. And between Folsom Prison and San Quentin and Pelican Bay, the Nuestra Familia was actually running a criminal organization outside the prisons from the prison. And we ended up making 28 indictments, prevented over, I think it was 30 murders. We, confiscated a bunch of drugs, and were able to dismantle an entire criminal organization called Nuestra Familia. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, if we ever come back for part two, which I hope we do, I'm going to ask you about why the FBI is more successful in dope cases than the DEA in some cases, especially back then. Because I do remember back then when, I was in 95, I was on my way to the drill field, but I had made a stop at Quantico, bought the book of how to become an agent. I mean, everything. I just didn't meet the qualification. I didn't have a degree, and I was too dumb. Didn't know what I didn't know. Still am today, but it doesn't matter. Those, those moments in time kind of shape who you are and what you want to do. And here you are on SWAT. So let's get into the meat of it. There's going to be some people listening to this that, HRT, so what? And I'm going to fill in the blanks, not to defend it, but I do know a little bit about it, not by being on it or anything, but just through you, vicariously through other people. HRT is only about 450 strong, 40 years into its existence, and that's today. And here we have you, right? What was your number? Aren't you A something?
96.
A96. So,
I wasn't a 96 operator. That was just
no,
my,
I know. Right. Call sign, right? Yeah. So I didn't mean to skew that. Sorry. But out of 450 ever, I mean, it's kind of like a unicorn. And people say, well, HRT must be easy or hard or whatever. Remind me though, they're a bunch of humans, right? They're still human beings. They just have a different mindset. So you get invited to HRT because you can't just show up and go, right? You have to be invited.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And how did you get your invite? Because of SWAT?
Yeah, I think because of SWAT. I mean, my story is I went to two selections. I went to my first HRT selection in 1997, made it through the selection process. The HRT, unlike other organizations, just because you make it through the selections doesn't mean you're on the team. Once you make it through selection, then they have the vote, and it's all the operators and the leadership of HRT. Basically, they throw your picture on a big screen. They have all your scores for all the events that you did and how you ranked in them. And then peer evaluations are huge. So I think we started off in that 1997 selection. I think it was about 50, 55 people may have originally showed up to try out. And what was really bad on that selection year, it was like a Black Flag Day. They had a selection in July, middle of the summer in Virginia, and it was, it was 110 degrees, and it was just miserable. The entire base is shut down for any physical activity, but there's HRT selection going on. And of the 55 that started, I think we stood at the end of the day, there was 12 standing, and I think they took 6 or 7 of the 12, and I was not selected. That was a hard, bitter pill to swallow. Because they just crush you. I mean, it's just
well, let's go back.
HRT,
so you get
okay.
you get invited. You think you have the golden ticket, and those that don't know you or can't see you or whatever well in person, you're you're huge, right? You're a monster. So people don't know that, but I mean, you're a gigantic ginger, right? Fair skinned person. But I mean, I always tell you, I think you're a tank, but like a door kicker and HRT would be obvious. And when you went there and you get invited, you're like, hey, here I come, and I'm going to be HRT. And half the people that I know that make it in other tier 1 organizations or other even selections through police SWAT or Marine special units or whatever, they're coming there to teach the old people how it's done, or the people that show up with that humble pie. And I don't think that has a lot to do with, I don't know. I know nothing about selection. But when you got the note saying, "Hey man, thanks for participating. You went through all X amount of weeks and we killed you in the heat, you and your ginger skin and your big ass body. No, thank you." What's that like?
It was gut wrenching, and they don't tell you why. These they tell you where some of the things that you did well on, and then what is critical at the end of the phone call, they'll do one or two things. They'll invite you back to another selection and say you're welcome to try again, or they don't. When the team commander calls you, because team commander makes all the phone calls to let you know you didn't make the team. The assistant number two deputy team commander calls you if you do make the team. So,
Did you
and
know
of course,
that? Did you know that when you answered the phone?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I didn't know who it was initially, and when he says, "Hey, this is," I did Les Hazen at the time. "This is Les Hazen, Commander HRT." Uh, right away, oh, I didn't make it.
Do
So
you remember
again,
what day of the week it was? Like,
no,
was it
I
a
don't remember.
beginning? Was it beginning or the end? Like, did you have to suck through the whole weekend and be like, "Oh my God?"
I don't remember. I just know that it was a gut punch, because you go through a lot in those weeks of selection, and again, it was a dream of mine. But knowing they wanted me to at least try again was encouraging, and it just made me that much more disciplined. It, it showed me, where I thought my weaknesses were in the selection process, so I can improve upon those. So 2 years later, I tried out again in 1999, made it through selection, and got picked up as an operator in 1999.
So when you have that gut punch and they don't talk to you through selection, do they? Do they tell you anything like goods, bads, or others, or
No,
basically it's kind of
that's
like,
the whole thing. There's zero feedback. There's no screen. It's not like, well, it's modeled after buds. It's only a 2 week selection. Everybody, oh, 2 weeks, that's easy. Ranger selection is what is it, 6 months or whatever. Um, True. We have a 2 week selection, and then once you get picked up, now you have 8 months of what we call NOTS, new operator training school. So that's where, again, that's where the rest of buds comes into play. But the 2 weeks of selection is modeled after Hell Week. They want to um, put stresses in your life through lack of sleep, lack of food, lack of water. You're cold, wet, tired, miserable, and hungry for 2 weeks, and then they test your decision making abilities, your decision processes. They want to know, what kind of person are you when you are miserable? How do you treat your peers? They put you through a lot of arrest scenarios, both individually and with other members of your selection team. And they want to see how well you function when your entire body just wants to, crawl into a corner and, you know, suck your thumb and cry out for mommy. And
yeah, yeah,
so, so that's kind of the selection process. They want to see how you shoot, how you react, how you act when you are at your lowest. That's the intent of the 2 weeks. You have to give a verbal presentation as well. They make you actually stand in front of all the operators. They give you a subject, and it's usually about a serial killer or an FBI operation. And they give you part of the weekend between the 2 weeks to work on that. And then Monday morning, they tell you you will have a 30-minute presentation on this. So you're spinning up for a 30-minute presentation, and then you get in front of the room with all the operators, and the guy says, "Yeah, we're running out of time. You have 5 minutes for this presentation." So again, it's just, they test all your phobias. If you're afraid of dark, cramped spaces, they're going to find that out. They have all these
right.
different tests that, these scenarios that put you in, where you're in a sewer tunnel and it's half filled with water, and they put, rope in it, and non-poisonous snakes, and you can't see the hand in front of your face. You're in a sewer, and you got to go from one end to the other, and there's like 4 different ways to get there. So yeah, they test your height phobia. They test your phobias of everything. And again, it's 2 weeks. Decision making processes are checked. Your peer reviews are very important, and then afterwards you have the NOTS, new operator training school, that I alluded to earlier, which is about 6 or 7 months, might be 8 months now, where that's where you get your certification to dive in the sky, in the skydive, your HAHO, your Halo. You learn CQB skills, all the different weapon systems out there, and knife fighting skills, hand-to-hand combat skills. But a real push on CQB, both in tubular assaults, strongholds, and urban assaults, that sort of thing.
So we're going to take a break in about 2 minutes, and then we'll come back to wrap it up. But I want, because we talked to Greg Vecchi from BSU, right? And we talk about different humans and bad people and good people and everything. When you're going through and you have that mindset, the closest thing I've got to the hard peer reviews that I've done a bunch of them different formats, but I think where I learned how to get through them was drill instructor school. That almost broke me. But people often say I'd be a drill instructor. And I say, okay, well, go stay awake 3 days without any food and water, and then wake up and yell as loud as you can for 12 hours. Don't stop. And I mean, literally, that's what it equates to. Like, if you can do that, you're good. You want to go join something special, go run the PFT back to back twice with all you've got. No food, no water, no sleep, by the way. And, because they're testing to make sure when you do run out of excuses, you can come up with new ones to win, right? You got to make the excuse to win the day. And the peer reviews just whooped my ass because you were going in to tell them, because you're competing for a class spot, right, in drill instructor school. And I was dumb. So I had to rely on my physical prowess, my intensity, everything. And at the same time, be humble. And that was an art form almost to learn, because I almost failed out because of that. And I think that when there's two types of people listening again. There'll be the people that are, what's an operator? And, one of the funniest things I've ever seen you do to somebody, and you didn't mean it, but it happened. So I'm not going to embarrass you. I'm just going to say this happened, but you had the right to make it happen. This is what very few people understand. We were talking to a SEAL, and he's like, "Hey man, I'm a Navy SEAL, HRT." And you're like, "Oh, cool. So you were a vanilla SEAL?" I've never heard that in my whole life, ever, never, not in 100 years. The only thing I know about SEALs is they write a lot of good books and make cool movies, right? A bunch of friends in, CAG and stuff like that. Never really met more than like two or three. I think I know 3 or 4 HRT guys. And you being my closest friend, I mean, I think you can attest, not to defend me, but I don't really ask you about HRT that much. I mean, it's cool, but I never wanted to be on HRT. So it's not like, to me, that's what it is. But I want the audience to understand those peer reviews, they're no joke. And when you say 2 weeks, that's easy. Okay, well, go to the Sonoma Desert or something, or whatever, and stay awake for a day. Don't eat, and then go walk 100 miles, and then let me know what you think about going to your 2 week selection. And when people get offended by Vanilla SEAL or SEAL Team 6 or whatever, the difference is really the difference of the level of excuses to make, right? You got to find a reason to win. Is that not accurate? Like, you have to find a reason to win.
Yeah, that's what the whole selection process is about, is how bad do you want it. I mean, that's true with going through buds, or any kind of marsoc, CAG Rangers. Those guys they're hardcore, patriot warrior, heroes of mine. But all those different organizations, what they do is they want to see how you do perform when you are at your worst. How deep are you going to dig? How bad do you want this? Because it's just, if you don't want it, you're not going to finish it, because it's just too hard. And you're say, I'm done. I don't want this bad enough. So all those kind of organizations, do that. They want to see how bad you want this. How deep are you willing to dive into your own heart and pull that. You know, the mind quits long before the body does.
Oh yeah.
The body can do a lot more than you think it can withstand. And I definitely learned that during the selection too. It's like, you got to control what's up here. Once you think about quitting, it's done. You're done. I mean, because that's just going to keep creeping, and finally you're going to say, I'm going to quit now. So
Yeah, that's a tough bid. And so getting to like about HRT and talking, we'll get through that, and then how it transcended into your book really quick. So there's 3 tier 1 units, as I understand, right? I'm not an expert on tier 1, don't know anything about it other than, what I do know. But you got CAG, SEAL Team 6, and HRT. Those two have, overseas missions. And I know that HRT has, we don't need to go there, how they, augment those teams for arrest, search, and seizure purposes overseas. But as a domestic unit, who does HRT call if everything goes wrong? Right?
Well, the reason HRT was founded was because the United States domestically needed a team with a skill set to take care of those, high threat situations and hostage situations. Um, I don't want to get in the weeds too much, but we have a thing called the Posse Comitatus Act. The Posse Comitatus Act prevents the U.S. military from enforcing federal laws unless martial law is declared. Okay, it's the reason why the Coast Guard cannot be in the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense cannot enforce laws. The Coast Guard actually enforces federal fishing laws and other maritime safety laws. So the Coast Guard cannot be in the DoD and enforce laws. That's why right now it's in Department of Homeland Security. It used to be Department of Transportation, but now they're in DHS because they needed that authority to enforce laws. So long story short, 1972 Munich Summer Olympics. Many people recall that if they're over the age of 50 or so. And back in 1972, the Olympic Games were the television show that everybody watched. This is long before the internet. This is long before satellite TV. There was one, event every 4 years that was held that captivated the world, and it was the Summer Olympic Games. In 1972, Munich, Germany hosted them in the middle of the Olympic Games. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, P.R.O, took 13 Israeli athletes hostage, shut the games down. The terrorists negotiated with the local federal authorities in Germany to fly the hostages out, and they'd be released when the hostage takers got, freedom. The German government conducted a hostage rescue operation at the Munich airport that was not successful. All 13 Israeli athletes were killed during their failed assault, and many of the hostage takers escaped. That was 1972. During that time, the United States had already been awarded the 1980 Lake Placid Winter Olympics. That's where the hockey team beat the Soviets in that famous hockey game there in 1980. And also the United States had already been awarded the 1984 Los Angeles Summer Olympic Games.
That's right.
So 1972, President Nixon was president. He gets his National Security Council together and asks the Security Council, okay, gentlemen, what is the U.S. response? What's our response, United States government, going to be if we in Lake Placid or in LA have a similar incident that they had in Munich? Well, the National Security Council raised their hands and says, we don't have an answer. Delta Force was so secretive at that time that the government didn't even acknowledge they existed. They disavowed its existence. SEAL Team 6 dev group, Richard Marcinko had not invented the SEAL Team 6 yet either. So basically, the U.S. government did not have a response and the capabilities to take care of a hostage situation just like in Munich. So at that time, the President of the United States directed the director of the FBI to develop a team that would have that skill set and that training and the equipment and the know-how. And that was the genesis of the HRT. And the first group of operators was selected. Danny Colson, good friend of both you and mine, was the first team commander. And they spent close to a year down in Fort Bragg training with Delta Force, having Delta Force teach them the nuances of close quarter battle, hostage rescue, advanced tactics, that sort of thing. So that was the genesis of the HRT. It was a result of the 1972 Munich massacre.
What a story. So let's take a break. Let's take a 5-minute bio break. Ruben, can you pop on?
We want to extend a heartfelt thank you to all of our sponsors for making Destination Never Here a reality. First, to AMP Global Strategies, your partner in public safety and technology. Specializing in cutting-edge security systems, AMP alerts officials within seconds of a weapon detection or gunfire, ensuring rapid responses when they matter most. Trusted by schools, governments, and first responders worldwide, our team of safety experts brings first-hand knowledge to every project. Choose AMP Global Strategies for a safer tomorrow. Also, a special thank you to Skyla, the #1 AI-powered gun detection system for enabling proactive security solutions in real time. With Skyla, you can be proactive, not reactive, because seconds matter. And to our community of experts, thank you for your continuous support. And now, back to the show.
Hey everybody, welcome back, and thanks so much for sticking around. We're just now talking to Greg for part 2 of Destination Never Here. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow. More importantly, share this with everybody. We're getting 30, 40,000 views per right now, and we sure would like to get up to about 100 to 200,000. So Greg, thanks for coming back after the break. I want to clean up a couple things with my own, look back and maybe for my own understanding, but it'll help translate the message. So when you talk about, say, a SEAL team, like I've deployed with SEAL Team 2 before, SEAL Team, I think, 8 out of the Muse in North Carolina as a Marine. But I know their mission is X. What differentiates the mission of a regular SEAL to, say, Dev Group, or what everybody would traditionally know as SEAL Team 6, the Marcinko era? Like, what differentiates those two things?
Well, again, I was never a Navy SEAL, but the difference between a regular SEAL Team and SEAL Team 6 is basically SEAL Team 6 is made up of the all-stars of the other 10 SEAL teams. There are 10 SEAL teams out there, and the best of those teams are invited to Green Team selection at Dev Group. Dev Group is development group, which is basically the SEAL Team 6 is the all-stars of the SEAL team. They get, again, better weaponry, better training, and they get the more difficult tasks. Very similar to the difference between a SWAT team and HRT. FBI SWAT team, there's a SWAT team, FBI SWAT team in all 56 field offices. And again, those SWAT teams can be as few as 15, 18 guys to as many as maybe 20. But the HRT is made up of the best of those SWAT teams, and again, you have to be invited to try out for HRT as well. So you get the better weapons and a much better training. There are a lot of SWAT operators out there, and they're great, and they're good at what they do. But do a hostage rescue on an aircraft or on a bus, or even hostage rescue in a hotel room or an entire floor of a hotel. That skill set and a regular SWAT team just doesn't have, and you don't have the mechanisms either for the breaching. I mean, HRT has explosive breaching capabilities. The other FBI SWAT teams do not. They have mechanical breaching. They use a ram. They can bust in a door with brute strength, but they don't have the skill set to go through a wall with explosions or blow the door off or come down through the ceiling. That's explosive breaching techniques. So again, the SEAL team versus Dev Group, SEAL Team 6 is the same difference between a SWAT team and the HRT. It's just it's just more advanced training, more advanced equipment, and they get called for the more difficult operations that require more surgical shooting and different skills.
Yeah, I think resources, like coming from my side, where I was on SWAT a long while, but I also worked a patrol beat too at the most of that time. So we get either call out or we would take the days off for training, but it wasn't a dedicated full-time team, and it was more than a regional team. So I mean, we were like in that sweet spot for law enforcement, but we understand when Dallas comes in, that's all they do: live, eat, breathe, sleep, SWAT. But at the end of the day, you're eating a sandwich with the guy, and he's eating the sandwich the same way you are. It's just the different types of mechanisms for, I think, selection, diet and exercise, time, training, equipment, trust, things like that.
Well, you have a good point. An FBI SWAT team trains 3, maybe 4 days a month if they're lucky. Usually about 3 days a month of training for SWAT, because they're FBI agents. They're out doing investigations out in the field, running informants, investigations, that sort of thing. But they'll take 3 days a month to train for SWAT. The HRT is full time, so you're training 5, 6, 7 days a week full time in that SWAT type skill set. So that's why you get good at it, because that's all you do full time. You're not running investigations.
Remind me again, didn't you go to dive school?
No.
Okay, tell me again though, didn't you go to do something with buds?
Me personally, we send about
or
half
HRT,
the operators.
like
Half the HRT operators go to phase 2 of buds. Phase 2 is a dive phase. That's where they are. That's where you learn the Draeger system. I think even today, though, they may do all in-house, because now we've been going to that phase 2 buds dive training for so long. I think we now do that all in-house with HRT. And of course, not a lot, but we do have a handful of former SEALs, and generally are always on the HRT, regardless of what year. There's always a handful of SEALs in there. So I think all the Draeger certification is done in-house now at HRT.
Yeah, I bring that up because a lot of people, literally, I mean, and I told you, these comes from questions. Some is my own weird questions that I've asked you throughout the year, so they're not repeats. But like one of the questions came back is, what makes HRT say they're like SEALs, and I don't really understand the question because my new rule in life as I got over 40 and now I'm pushing the double nickel. What makes up that curiosity for the one question to the 99 good questions? And we focus so much on that one bullshit question. I want to focus on the 99, but there are some sweet spots in there. And I just want to clean that up because people see things like this and they're like, oh, ego and look at me and all those things. But what they're not understanding is the point that I just made. Everybody eats a sandwich the same way. We put our trousers on the same way. We wake up, we go to sleep. We have the same life problems. It's just our job description is different. And some of us are equipped to do different jobs than others. And like I've told you many times, I'm never equipped to go in HRT. I'm equipped to be an interviewer, right? I mean, that's all I really wanted to, this. I want to be a polygrapher. I failed, right? I'm not there, but so what? But having said that, this is something, I interviewed bad guys all for a living for years. So, and good guys, but you have to transcend those barriers. And do you see that when you're in the real world? Because now you're retired and you moved on. We're talking about your book, Stay Safe. But as you get out there, when people say, oh, HRT, cool story, bro. Like, did that rub on you a little bit, or did you have enough time out of HRT back into the real FBI as a real copper? Not that you weren't a real copper, but you don't do law enforcement activity, but you're back into being a real copper, and then you transcend back into the civilian world. Did you find that transition easy, or were there some rough spots?
There were some rough spots. I mean, I did 6 years on HRT, and the bureau is always evolving. And when I got on HRT in 1999, and then of course in 2001, you had the towers come down, and the FBI shifted gears, to almost 100% terrorism. Not 100%, but
Right.
we went from doing basic crimes to terrorism. It used to be 80% crime, 20% terrorism. Now it just flip flops: 80% terrorism, 20% crime. So I got on the team before 9/11, and then I got back into the field in 1995. I'm sorry, 99 in 2005. 2005. Trying to get my years mixed up here. I got on the team in 99. Got on the year. Got on the team in 99.
What's a decade between friends?
I got back into the field on investigations in 2005. And the paperwork had totally changed. I mean, doing paperwork for terrorism is a lot different than paperwork and write reports for criminal type cases. So it was a very hard transition because the FBI the FBI field that I had left in 1999 was completely different in 2005 because of the GWAT, Global War on Terrorism. So that made the transition hard. But as far as people, I mean, people are going to recognize what you did and honor it, or they're going to not, and that never bothered me. I mean, I don't care if people poo-poo the HRT or think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. It makes no matter to me. But
I think, but the application, right? The application of what you did and the way you put it forward, though, is super important because you're right. You and I have had this conversation 100 times. So people, just to, be fully transparent with everybody listening, nobody really gives a shit what we did yesterday, right? They want to know what's happening today. And they want to know how'd you climb to the top of this mountain for active shooter stuff. And we're going to get into that in a second, but people don't see the, sorry you didn't make it phone calls. They don't see the family, arguments that are one step away from a domestic violence call, or the, those, I mean, they're just true, right? You get in screaming matches, and hell, that could be me answering my own call. Whatever it is, mere humans, right? Mere mortals. Right. And, when we talked about being invincible, and my nickname for you again is Undeadable. I bought you a cup for your birthday, or a drinking glass for your birthday with it. But, you know, to get good at anything, you have to pour everything into it. And I think we built this whole conversation up into nothing's easy. Everything takes work. You need an excuse to win, not an excuse to quit. And what you said is, I mean, spot on. Once you let quit get into your brain, it's over, right? It's easy to walk away. It's easier to quit than it is to win. And people don't understand how hard it is to win because winning sucks. Winning takes everything. And then it leaves you empty, right? Because you want to win again. And what does winning even mean? Right. We have some good saves. We have some registered saves with our model that we invented. And I want to win more. Like I'm not satisfied. So when you wrote this book, let's get into the book. Hey, everybody, it's called Stay Safe. Highly recommend reading it. If you look over Greg's left shoulder, you'll see it on the shelf there. I happen to know the dude that's on the first opening cover. His name's Chris Grollnek. What are people saying about Stay Safe? This is one of the, I don't think I ever told Greg this. Greg sent me the outline to this, several, like 10 of the chapters, I think, and asked me to read them. And Greg being Greg, he's like, hey, you finished it yet? I said, you sent it 5 minutes ago, dude, back off. And like a couple days later, I'm like, okay, I got through chapter 1. He goes, well, you need to read them all. And I did. And I remember I was on the couch, I had my dog with me, and I was going, I was, I just survived a terrible medical thing. And that's how Greg and I met back in the day, but that's not important. I was fascinated because it looked like a manuscript for literally how to stay safe in life. It's life secrets. And I think you even say that, right? Security secrets for today's dangerous world, but it's life secrets. And in there, it goes all the way from, hey, a lock and a bandana to, stabbing someone in the eye with a pencil or a tactical pen, right? And people hear that and they get either switched on or switched off. But if you just listen to this whole conversation, you'll understand how we got there. We are all trying to help you. But Greg, I mean, you want that next step. I never wrote a book. You wrote a book. Tell us about writing it. What made you write it?
Yeah, I got tired of, seeing people get killed in these active shooter events because they're doing the wrong thing. I just got tired of seeing people die needlessly. And of course, it's through violence, but at the same time, had they done certain things, they wouldn't have been a victim of violence. They would have been able to escape it or recognize it before it happened. So it really just came out of the desire to, educate the common man on ways to stay safe. The first chapter is survival mindset. You have to have it. You have to develop it. It doesn't come natural. And the example I use in the very first story I tell in my book in chapter 1, Survival Mindset, is a Pulse nightclub shooting. You had 9 people run into a bathroom, and those 9 people were calling 911. We know what happened in that restroom because of the recorded calls of 911. The shooter walks into the bathroom and shoots all 9 individuals one at a time. It's not like he threw a frag grenade in there and killed them with one fell swoop. He went in there and shot each of the 9 people several times, and they all died. And I wasn't there, and I don't mean to speak ill of the dead. And I do understand the fear of what they're going through, but why didn't anybody stand up and get a little organized and say, okay, listen, when this guy walks through the door to that bathroom, we are going to take him down. We're going to take away his weapon. We're going to, 9 people, not a man alive can fight off 9 people. They just can't. One person grabs the left leg, one person grabs the right leg, left arm, right arm, neck, hips, the weapon, and you still got 3 or 4 more bodies left to start pummeling them. But the people in that restroom, bottom line, did not have a survival mindset. They didn't go in that bathroom and then develop a plan to save themselves. They went in that bathroom, they huddled in a corner together, crying, scared to death, and they waited for their turn to die. That's not
49.
Who,
yeah.
That's not who I am. That's not who I want you to be. I want you to have that survival mindset. I want you to be able to fight for your life when your life is in danger. And these people didn't do that. And there's another example of the Virginia Tech shooting when the same thing happened, where the shooter shoots everybody in the classroom and nobody got up and ran. One of the statistics I say, and you've heard me say it 1,000 times, Chris, is the hit rate on a moving target by a shooter with a handgun is only 4%. You have a 96% chance of not being shot by the one simple thing, running. You had the Sutherland Springs Baptist church shooting. 26 or 28 people were killed, but another 26 or 28 escaped through the back door. Well, those that got up and ran survived. Those that hid behind the pews and did not move, they were the victims. Hiding behind a cash register or behind a church pew or in a closet is not the right answer for an active shooter event. The right answer is get up and move. And if you can't move, then look for ways to defend yourself, to fight back. Look for those improvised weapons. Break off a leg of a chair. Take off your high heel shoe. If you're in a bathroom, break the mirror and use a piece of the glass from the mirror as a knife. Carry a tactical pen with you. There's just so many things out there you can do. So again, survival mindset, situational awareness, you develop those two things, chances are you'll never be in a critical incident. But if you are caught up in critical incident, this book also teaches you how to get out of it. Like I said, we all take these preventative measures through insurance and locking our doors and having a fire extinguisher, wearing a seatbelt. We have airbags in our car. We take all these preventative measures to keep us safe, but we don't take those preventative measures to prevent and keep us safe from acts of violence. And this book here does that.
Yeah. Was it easy to write? Did it write itself, or was it? Did you get your feelings hurt like a human? Where no, seriously, because I know this answer. You get to the end of it, and people are like, "Hey, that's great, but I would change like these 402 things."
Yeah, there's everybody's got to have an opinion. It took me just under a year to write. It was I enjoyed it. I really did. I enjoyed the process. It wasn't easy, of course, but I did enjoy the process. I did enjoy the research I put into it. There's some great books I reference in my book. I'll name those real quick. The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker, an outstanding read. On Combat is a great read by Lieutenant Colonel
Dave Grossman.
Dave Grossman, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier Tim Larkin's When Violence is the Answer. Just great books. Highly recommend those. And so again, the research I did, and then getting all the data and talking to police departments and victims and things like that, and then I'm also just looking at all the tricks of the trade that I learned and all the different HRT training I had and courses I took that they sent me to. I kind of incorporate those in a book. So the book's written for the layman. It really is. We're Joe Q. citizen. And I think it has the possibility and potential to save lives. If you read the book, do what the book says, and keep your head on a swivel. That's a good start.
What's your favorite topic to get up and speak about?
Probably survival mindset. I just really like that. A lot of people are almost born with it, but most people have to develop it. And it's just getting those people to think outside the box a little bit about things differently. Recognizing that evil exists, recognizing, like I said, minutes matter in any critical incident. It's not how strong or how fast you are. It's how bad do you want it. How bad do you want to survive? That's survival mindset. You will develop a plan. You will do something that can save your life if you just think about it beforehand. We always use the analogy, if all of a sudden we spontaneously combust, our clothes catch on fire. We've been told since we were 2.5, 3 years old, 4 years old, if you catch on fire, you have a plan to save yourself. What is it? You stop, drop, and roll. Well, we've been told that since we were 3 years old. Personally, I can't think of a worse way to die than dying by fire. But I have a plan in my mind on how to solve that problem if I'm ever facing that incident. I stop, drop, and roll. It fixes the problem. We need to do the same thing for acts of violence. We need to have a plan in place so that our mind will revert back to what we were thinking about this incident and revert to automatically what to do. Like we stop, drop, and roll because it's ingrained into us. So, the famous saying I use, the body cannot go where the mind has never been. You have to think about these bad incidents, these acts of violence, think about them, develop a plan. So when that incident does happen, God forbid, your mind goes back to that plan and you react. The body cannot go where the mind has never been. If you don't think about what you're going to do, you will freeze in fear. When you freeze in fear in a lot of critical incidences, you die.
Yeah, I think That is a great topic, and I've watched you give it before in front of every demographic, and everybody's captivated. One of my favorite ones, though, and I'll just tell you my favorite one for you is Schaefer Security Group having the opportunity to speak to those traveling executives and the CEOs and the stay safes for the next level income earners that have different threats than the average human being walking down the street. It's not that they're better people; it's just they've been more successful financially or whatever. Now they've become targets. And I've listened to you give this presentation a few times. Highly recommend from Chris Grollnek. Hire Greg to give you that to your executives. Or if you're going overseas as a family and you need a plan, um, those are the people that I've watched you just shift that focus, because so many people turn off that one switch. Oh, active shooters. Thanks so much. You know, they're really low probability, high impact events though. And we get the people that are either scared to death or they understand there's a risk. And with the national standard that we created, and for those who don't know, Greg, he is a principal at the Active Shooter Prevention Project. You know, we created this thing. It's for everybody. It's for the 4-year-old to the 96-year-old.
Yep.
And we can't say enough about it. But I really can't say enough about Schaefer Security Group, the bodyguard services, the executive protection, the speeches. But my favorite, like just my personal favorite, is that CEO protection and traveling executive program for overseas travel, because I think you saved more lives that way than you don't even realize. And it's really cool to me.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So what have we left out? What do you want to talk about? Anything else? We got 5 more minutes or 3 more minutes. It's up to you.
Yeah, the Active Shooter Prevention Project, Chris brought me on this when it first came into being, I guess, 2 years ago now?
For this, yes, but like
for this. Well,
2017, yeah,
we've been friends for a while, but the Active Shooter Prevention Project kind of really, the thought process was back in 2017, but it really got
sure.
some footing in the last 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, where we focus on prevention. And I like to tell people that we're the only firm that's really doing that. We'll come in, we'll do an assessment of your building, your church, your school, your life, whatever. We'll do an assessment, find out what the threats are, what the risks are, and then we provide you solutions on how to prevent those risks and threats from coming into life. We mitigate those through preventative measures. What most firms do when it comes to the active shooter world is they focus on the response. And that's all well and good. You definitely need to know how to respond in the event you are captured in one of these events. And we need to train our police better in how to respond. But police officers are human beings, and they fail just like, every human has failed. And sometimes they don't run to the gunfire, as we saw in Parkland and Uvalde and those kind of incidences. So we definitely need to train our police officers better on how to respond. But let's get what we call left to bang. And there's a great book out there called Left to Bang. When I say left to bang, we want to fix things before the event happens. We don't want to have to respond to them after they happen, because once that first shot is fired, people are dying. So let's get in front of it, where we can prevent that shooter from entering the building, from entering the school, from identifying a weapon when it's pulled out of the car, in the parking lot, 80 yards away or 100 yards away. Those are preventative measures. Let's get better locks on the doors. Let's get the window films and make them ballistic, and the ballistic doors, and artificial intelligence and cameras that not only recognize knives and firearms, but could also identify a flood, a fire, or people stealing catalytic converters out of your parking lot. I mean, AI is such a wonderful addition to existing camera systems, and we have providers that do that can really help get you on that left side of the bag to help stop these things before they happen. And again, the Active Shooter Prevention Project, with Chris's leadership, we're the only company I know of that has brought together 18, 20 of the best in the industry. And when it comes to security and technology and preventative measures and studying of violence, we have 20 companies that are the best out there. We brought them all together under one umbrella, and we can provide those answers to you. And it's just so damn proud to be a part of that, because we are saving lives. And as you said earlier, we already have a couple of saves, recorded under our belt. That box is checked. We have saved lives, unquestionably, because we have prevented active shooter events. and we know that we are the one that prevented it.
Yeah, prevention's hard to measure, and here we go. All right, brother. Hey, man, everybody, stay safe. Highly recommend. Available on Amazon. Get it on our website. We've redone the website thanks to our executive producer, Ruben Roel. I want to thank AMP for sponsoring this podcast, as well as Skyla. Unparalleled weapons detection, really. The new IPVM report came out yesterday, and they hate everybody. They love the Skyla. They get, I think it's like 10 for 10. So listen, everybody, thank you for following. Please like, share, pass it on, follow us. And Greg, have a great day, my man. Thank you so much. Enjoy the storms. Ruben, thank you very much, sir. Everybody else, we'll see you soon. Just remember, never here is achievable, but it takes all of us.